Jeju Air Flight 2216 crashed on 29 December 2024 at 09:02:57 local time. The accident occurred at Muan International Airport in Korea. There were 179 fatalities and 2 serious injuries. The airport has been closed for the last 19 months. A preliminary report was published, which was 6 pages long. An interim report was prepared for publication 7 months after the accident, but withdrawn due to protests by the families of the victims and the pilots' unions. 3 separate system domains now have to be explained: propulsion, electrical and data, and hydraulics and landing configuration. Can one physically credible initiating event explain all 3 outcomes without contradicting the known 737NG system architecture? Welcome to Independent Aircraft Investigations. My name is Richard Godfrey. In this episode, we will examine the known facts surrounding the Jeju Air Flight 2216. This episode is called Jeju Air 2216, One Failure or 3. The aircraft involved was a Boeing 737-800, originally purchased by Ryanair and delivered on 4 September 2009, and subsequently leased to Jeju Air on 3 February 2017. Both the FDR and CVR have been recovered and downloaded, but both stopped working at 08:58:50 local time, 4 minutes and 7 seconds before impact. At this point, the aircraft was over water, 2,257 meters or 1.2 nautical miles, or in time 28.5 seconds, from the runway 01 threshold. The last ADS-B data was sent at 08:58:49, showing an altitude of 500 feet, a ground speed of 150 knots, and a track of 359 degrees 2. The preliminary report stated the speed and pressure altitude when the recorders stopped were 161 knots and 498 feet. ATC recorded a Mayday call at 08:58:56 local time, just 6 seconds after the recorders stopped, reporting a bird strike. The preliminary report states that remains of Baikal teals were found in both engines. Baikal teals are a duck-like bird weighing between 430 and 440 grams each. Muan did have a pre-existing and statistically identifiable bird strike exposure. There had been at least 10 recorded strikes in the preceding 2019 to August 2024 period, and its strike rate per aircraft movement was the highest among the 14 major airports in Korea. The aircraft made a belly landing with the landing gear and flaps retracted and overshot the runway, impacting a concrete localizer and embankment structure. The airport infrastructure itself, and in particular the localizer installation and its supporting structure, is part of the investigation. What are the facts? The dual-engine bird strike is undisputed. The crew decided to go around and there was a further flight for around 4 minutes. The landing gear and flaps were not extended, and the aircraft made a belly landing. There was a simultaneous cessation of the FDR and CVR. Recorder Independent Power Supply, RIPS, was mandated 8 months after the aircraft was manufactured. In the event of the loss of both engine-driven integrated drive generators, IDGs, a master caution is displayed, and the AC and DC supply is automatically switched to standby power from the main and auxiliary batteries. DC is fed direct from the battery, and AC is fed via a static inverter. What is the chronology of events? At 08:58:14, the birds were reportedly sighted. At 08:58:23, a go-around begins according to the ADS-B trajectory data. At 08:58:26, a right engine bird strike and fire and smoke event is recorded by KBS. At 08:58:45, left engine thrust lever reportedly moved to idle. At 08:58:49, the last ADS-B transmission. At 08:58:50, the left engine fire handle is reportedly pulled. At 08:58:50, the FDR and CVR recording cease. At 08:58:56, Mayday, bird strike declaration. At 09:02:57, the runway 19 overrun crash. Why did the crew consider landing so urgent that they returned immediately with both flaps and landing gear retracted, rather than remain airborne long enough to diagnose the electrical, hydraulic condition, and complete the alternate flap and landing gear non-normal checklist procedures? What happened at approximately 08:58:49 to 50 that simultaneously removed FDR, CVR, and ADS-B recording transmission capability, coincident with isolation of the left engine, while leaving sufficient propulsion and flight control capability for another 4 minutes of controlled flight? The ADS-B trajectory indicates that the go-around had begun by approximately 08:58:23. About 3 seconds later, the KBS imagery captures an abnormal event at the right engine, consistent with the bird strike sequence. Subsequent examination found bird remains in both engines. Was there more than one bird strike? Within seconds of the bird strike sequence, the aircraft suffered an unexplained loss of FDR, CVR, and ADS-B data. Whether one or both engine-driven generators had been lost at that point remains one of the important electrical questions. Let's have a look at the aircraft history. The accident aircraft never had any prolonged stopover, downtime, or maintenance in the year before the accident. The aircraft operated on average 5.7 flights per day, with an average stopover time of 1 hour 30 minutes. It appears that all maintenance work was carried out overnight. The weather at the airport was +2 degrees centigrade, a high pressure of 1028 hectopascal, light winds at just 2 knots from 110 true, a few clouds at 4,500 feet, and 9-kilometer visibility. The key questions that any investigation needs to answer. Number one, why did both the FDR and CVR stop recording simultaneously during the initial approach? Number two, what electrical power was necessarily available while an engine was still producing thrust? Number three, which hydraulic pumps could therefore still operate? Number four, did normal or alternate braking remain available? Number five, what electrical or hydraulic conditions would actually prevent landing gear extension despite the manual gravity extension system? Let's have a look at the engines. The accident aircraft was fitted with either two CFM56 7B26 or 7B27 engines. The Korean preliminary report does not specify the engine type fitted to HL 8088. The engine identification, therefore, has to be established independently from Boeing, CFM, Ryanair, and Jeju Air configuration records. Each engine has an integrated drive generator with an oil cooling system. Let's have a look at the radar system. Thales won a contract to install a STAR-NG and an RSM-NG radar system for Muan International Airport. The work was completed on the 31st of August 2024, which is 4 months before the accident. ADS-B stopping does not necessarily mean the aircraft disappeared from ATC surveillance. Muan had installed primary radar capable of tracking a non-cooperative aircraft. The question is, where are those radar data? The STAR-NG has a 100 nautical mile range, 3D detection, and is an S-band system. The RSM-NG has a 256 nautical mile range, works in military mode 1, 2, and 3, civilian A and C, mode S, and ADS-B, and is an L-band system. That makes the STAR-NG data particularly important. The loss of ADS-B at 085849 should not, by itself, have caused LH8088 to disappear from Muan's surveillance picture. If STAR-NG was operational, it should potentially have continued producing primary returns when the aircraft climbed out after the go-around decision, as it turned back towards the airport, descended in a second approach, and landed on runway 19. The electrical power system generates and distributes AC and DC power to the airplane. The system has automatic and manual controls and protection. A standby AC and DC system gives normal and emergency power. The electrical power system has 4 main AC power sources and 1 standby power source. These are the main AC power sources and their supply capacity. Number 1, the left integrated drive generator, IDG1, at 90 kVA. The right integrated drive generator, IDG2, at also 90 kVA. The APU starter generator, 90 kVA, as long as you're below 32,000 feet, and goes down to 66 kVA, up to 41,000 feet. And finally, an external power from ground power systems, also at 90 kVA. The IDGs and APU starter generators supply a 3-phase 115 200-volt nominal at 400 Hertz. The AC power system design prevents two sources to the same load at the same time. The static inverter supplies a one-phase 115-volt AC output to the AC standby bus. The APU is used on the ground if needed and normally switched off before taxiing. And three transformer rectifier units, TRUs, change 115-volt AC to 28-volt DC. The airplane also has these DC power sources: a main battery and the main battery charger, an auxiliary battery with the auxiliary battery charger. The batteries are the backup DC source if other sources do not operate. The standby power control unit, the SPCU, controls the distribution of DC power. With the loss of normal power, the standby power system supplies a minimum of 60 minutes of AC and DC power to systems necessary to maintain safe flight. The batteries supply DC power. The static inverter uses battery power to make AC power. The SPCU controls the distribution of AC and DC standby power. According to the Boeing 737NG system architecture, there is no normal single electrical failure or designed electrical configuration that should simultaneously terminate the FDR, CVR, and ADS-B functions across the separated left and right electrical systems, whilst leaving the aircraft capable of continued controlled flight. Why did three independent and redundantly powered recording transmission functions cease simultaneously when the Boeing architecture says a single electrical failure should not be capable of producing that outcome? The evidence establishes simultaneous loss of FDR recording, CVR recording, and ADS-B transmission. It does not yet establish that electrical power loss was the mechanism responsible for all three. Approximately at 08:58:49, while HL8088 was still airborne at about 500 feet, three independent data functions ceased essentially simultaneously. The FDR and CVR are on separated electrical data paths, and the transponder installation is likewise redundant across the left and right electrical systems. The Boeing architecture is specifically intended to prevent a single electrical failure from removing all these functions. HL8088 may have suffered two distinct major events: a dual-engine bird strike and propulsion emergency, followed at 08:58:50 by a separate catastrophic electrical or avionics system event that defeated multiple redundant and separated power data paths. Standby AC bus and standby DC bus automatically switch to their backup source upon loss of both engine-driven generators. The standby power off amber light should not be illuminated after the automatic switchover. If this light is illuminated, the first checklists to be started before the loss of both engine-driven generators is the standby power off non-normal checklist. One consequence of the AC standby bus being unpowered is the ATC1 transponder is inoperative. Assuming ATC1 remains selected, as would normally be expected, the permanent cessation of ADS-B at around 08:58:50 is consistent with the loss of the AC standby bus, not merely loss of both engine-driven generators. ATC-1 is the normal default selection. The crew can select ATC-1 or ATC-2 using the selector on the P8 aft electronics panel. The ADS-B record shows a completely stable surveillance function throughout the Bangkok to Muan flight. 739 uninterrupted received data points, averaging 23.369 seconds between each data point. The only small gap was for 5 minutes whilst over the East China Sea between Taiwan and Japan. Nothing in those ADS-B messages tells us which physical transponder, ATC-1 or ATC-2, was supplying them. Let's have a look at the hydraulic system. The open hydraulic questions are these. What hydraulic capability remained after the dual bird strike? Were the electric hydraulic pumps available? A major electrical failure could affect the electrically driven hydraulic pumps, even if some engine-driven hydraulic pressure remains. Was normal landing gear extension attempted? On the 737NG, normal gear extension depends on System A hydraulic pressure. The shutdown of the left engine removed the normal engine-driven source of the hydraulic System A pressure. Whether System A remained available then depended, among other things, on the availability of its electric motor-driven pump and the electrical supply feeding it. If normal landing gear and flap extension were unavailable, why were backup alternatives not used? The backup manual gear extension system mechanically releases the up locks and does not depend on normal hydraulic pressure. Was there any mechanical reason the gear could not free fall and lock down? Possible issues would include uplock damage, structural deformation, jammed gear, or damage caused by the bird strike or subsequent maneuvering. Was the gear deliberately left retracted? If so, what was the crew's reason? Drag reduction, uncertainty over remaining thrust, concern over braking or directional control, or preparation for a deliberate gear-up landing? What braking capability remained? We need to know the condition of normal brakes, alternate brakes, brake accumulator pressure, and anti-skid systems. A crew who believed braking was unavailable might have viewed gear extension differently. Was the hydraulic problem independent of the electrical event or caused by it? The propulsion, electrical, and hydraulic systems have dependencies, but none is simply synonymous with the others. What cockpit indications and warnings were available after 08:58:50? If a major electrical failure occurred, the crew may have lost some hydraulic gear indications, even though mechanical backup capability remained. Did the crew actually operate the manual extension handles? Physical examination of the handles, the cables, the uplocks, and gear mechanisms could be decisive. What does the record show about gear state immediately before impact? It should be possible to distinguish gear remaining fully uplocked from attempted or partial deployment. The central unresolved question is therefore, Why did HL 8088 land with the gear retracted when loss of normal hydraulics alone should not have prevented manual gravity extension? Any complete accident reconstruction has to explain the retracted gear, independently of the engine damage and the simultaneous FDR, CVR, and ADS-B loss. The causality was multi-layered. The starting point was a decision as a precautionary measure to go around rather than land due to a bird strike hazard. This rapidly escalated into a dual-engine bird strike and a Mayday emergency situation. Propulsion, what thrust and engine-driven accessory capability actually remained after the bird strike and subsequent crew actions. Electrical and data, what happened at 08:58:49 that simultaneously terminated FDR, CVR, and ADS-B despite separated and redundant architecture. Hydraulics, gear, and flaps. Why were the landing gear and flaps still retracted when normal hydraulic failure alone should not prevent extension? So the causality question, were these consequences of one common initiating event, or did HL 8088 suffer two or more distinct major failures? Can one physically credible initiating event explain the engine damage, the defeat of separated and redundant electrical and data paths, and the failure or non-use of manual landing gear extension? If not, how many distinct failures are required? There is substantial reported evidence that the left engine was intentionally shut down, but that evidence is contained in an unpublished ARAIB investigation update rather than the published preliminary report. The KBS footage provides direct visual evidence that the right engine was experiencing an active abnormal combustion event during the subsequent flight, with visible flame and smoke. What cockpit indications caused the crew to shut down the left engine? What was the actual operating state of the right engine at that moment? And why did the loss of the left engine coincide within seconds with the loss of multiple electrical and data systems, despite the 737NG's electrical architecture?
가늠하기 어렵습니다. 다만 정상 착륙을 할 정도는 아니었을 것으로 전문가들은 추정합니다.
The right engine was plainly not an inert, completely stopped engine during the film sequence. There was active combustion and an audible rotating engine signature. What the footage cannot establish is how much thrust it was producing, or whether its generator remained capable of supplying the aircraft electrical system. The aircraft continued to fly for 4 minutes 7 seconds after the cessation of the FDR, CVR, and ADS-B data. It climbed, it turned, it descended, it aligned with the runway 19, and then did a belly landing on the runway. That subsequent flight path requires significant useful propulsive capability to have remained available. The visual and acoustic evidence identifies the right engine as operating during at least part of this period. In the following clip, we can see the aircraft climb out following the decision to go around. The aircraft then circles back toward the airport. The aircraft then aligns with an approach to runway 19. The aircraft then belly lands gear up on runway 19. At the start of the go-around flight, the right engine emits a flame and smoke. During the landing, the right engine can be heard whining at a high level of thrust.
가늠하기 어렵습니다. 다만 정상 착륙을 할 정도는 아니었을 것으로 전문가들은 추정합니다.
At least one engine was producing significant useful thrust after the recorders stopped, and the available visual evidence identifies the right engine as an operating engine during this period. Why did the FDR, CVR, and ADS-B disappear essentially simultaneously, while an engine capable of sustaining the aircraft in maneuvering flight apparently remained operating? On the first approach, both landing gear and flaps are extended as expected. On the second approach, neither landing gear nor flaps are extended. The tires of the main landing gear, when retracted on a Boeing 737-800, can still be seen under the aircraft. The photograph, not of the accident aircraft, was taken beneath a bright overcast sky. So the cloud layer acts like a huge diffuse light source. Light reaches the underside of the aircraft from a broad area of the sky, and the camera can expose for the aircraft without an intensely bright blue background dominating the exposure. Hence, you can see the fuselage panels, wheel wells, engines, and landing gear clearly. The landing gear was witnessed as extended by an eyewitness fishing near Mokpo at 08:57 local time by MBC. According to the ADS-B data at 23:57 UTC or 08:57 local time, the aircraft was over the water 6.3 nautical miles or 11.7 kilometers south of the airport at an altitude of 1,575 feet. The important difference is the lighting geometry in the MBC frame. The sky occupies almost the entire field and is extremely bright. The camera's automatic exposure, therefore, appears to have exposed primarily for the blue sky, leaving the underside of the aircraft several stops darker. The result is effectively a near silhouette. 86 seconds later, another picture of the aircraft from KBS shows the landing gear retracted. The ADS-B data at 23:58:26 UTC shows the aircraft was over the water 2.9 nautical miles or 5.4 kilometers south of the airport at 450 feet and starting to climb again. The ADS-B data ceases when the climb reached 600 feet. The flight crew had received the ATC message, "Caution birds," and may also have observed the flock. The ADS-B trajectory indicates that a go-around was initiated, during which the landing gear and flaps were retracted. On the second approach, after the go-around from the reverse direction in calm winds, the landing gear and the flaps were not extended. The expected configuration for landing is with the landing gear and flaps extended. And that raises a more fundamental operational question. Why, during the roughly 4 minutes available after the bird strike, did the aircraft proceed to a runway landing without either of the two most conspicuous configuration changes normally required for landing: gear down and landing flaps. Even on standby power, the landing gear indicator lights, either 3 green lights or 3 red lights, and the aural warning both function. Why was landing gear that had functioned normally on the first approach and was presumably retracted normally during the go-around not extended again for the final runway 19 landing? If the aircraft only reached an altitude of 1,075 feet during the go-around, then after the turn for the second approach, the aural warning should have sounded at 800 feet and possibly have been heard in the ATC recording. Even if hydraulic system A fails, there is a gravity drop backup system to extend the landing gear. Boeing recommends landing even with a partial landing gear because each element will absorb some of the shock. Bird strike was not an unforeseen environmental hazard at Muan International Airport. The Korean AIP had for years explicitly identified significant resident and migratory bird concentrations associated with the airport's surrounding wetlands and seashore, including winter season bird activity during morning operations and documented active bird strike mitigation measures. The following is taken from a report published in the 19 November 2020. The seashore and wetland are situated near Muan International Airport, and the seashore and wetland provide good nesting habitat for both resident birds such as the black-billed magpie, ring-necked pheasant, the rufous turtle dove, tree sparrow, mew gull, and migratory birds such as mallard, grey heron, egret, and house swallow. Mallards inhabit around the airport during winter season, normally October to March. Mallards are active during the morning time and evening time, and they are flying at high altitude. Grey heron and egret inhabit during summer season, normally August to September, and they are active during the daytime. Most of the resident birds are active during the daytime and fly at low altitude. Muan International Airport strives to prevent bird strikes by implementing both non-lethal techniques, gas cannons and playback of distress calls, as well as lethal techniques, live ammunition shooting during airport operating hours. The Baikal teal is specifically important in this case. Muan Airport lies within a major Baikal teal wintering region, and its runway 01 approach corridor crosses a landscape containing the same combination of sheltered water, reclaimed agricultural land, and feeding habitat that supports very large wintering aggregations elsewhere on the Korean western coast. One scientific survey of the Geum River estuary wintering area in 2008 recorded 500,000 Baikal teals. Boeing state that the probability of a total and unrecoverable AC power failure is remote because of the system design. A non-normal checklist for accomplishing an approach and landing on standby power is not required. Manual pressurization control and manual stabilizer trim are required. The left navigation radios and communication radio are operable on standby power. The captain's electronic flight instruments and left FMC are available. Only partial anti-skid is available, so excess approach airspeed is undesirable. Brake with caution. The flap position indicator is inoperative. Auto brakes and auto speed brakes are not available. Reverse thrust is available. So, in summary, the accident sequence started with the ATC tower cautionary message of bird activity and the flight crew's decision to abort the landing and go around. 3 seconds into the go-around, at least one bird strike occurred. The FDR, CVR, and ADS-B data all stopped essentially simultaneously and within 24 seconds of the initial bird strike. 6 seconds later, a Mayday emergency was declared for a bird strike during the go-around. There is no evidence that the APU was started. They had shut down the left engine, removing the System A engine-driven hydraulic pump. The right engine was damaged, but apparently continued producing useful thrust. What hydraulic capability remained in Systems A and B therefore depends critically on the state of the electric hydraulic pumps and the electrical distribution system. Were the electrical hydraulic pumps available? A major electrical failure could affect the electrically driven hydraulic pumps, even if some engine-driven hydraulic pressure remained. If normal gear extension was unavailable, they needed manual landing gear extension. If normal flap extension was unavailable, they needed alternate flap extension. Boeing explicitly tells crews facing exactly these kinds of lengthy, non-normal checklist actions to, and I quote, plan an extended straight-in approach with time allocated for the completion of any lengthy NNC steps, such as the use of alternate flap or landing gear extension systems. Jeju Air 2216 did almost the opposite. It made a rapid, low-level reversal and returned to runway 19, arriving approximately 4 minutes after the recorder cessation, still with both gear and flaps retracted. The crew may have known that the aircraft had suffered a major degradation of its normal hydraulic and electrical configuration systems, but elected or were forced by circumstances to get the aircraft onto the ground before there was sufficient time to complete the alternate procedures. So what is our conclusion? The evidence presently available does not support reducing this accident to a simple pilot error explanation. The evidence points to a complex interplay of 2 or 3 system degradations. Number 1, the propulsion degradation following bird ingestion into both engines. Number 2, an unexplained electrical and data system degradation associated with the simultaneous cessation of FDR, CVR, and ADS-B data. And number 3, a possible hydraulic and configuration degradation affecting normal landing gear and flap extension. Are these 3 consequences of one physical event, or 2 interconnected failures, or 3 separate problems occurring within seconds of one another? Until an accident reconstruction can trace a physically credible path through the actual Boeing 737 NG architecture, bird strike is the beginning of the explanation, not the end of it. Airport planning must allow for runway excursions and overrun areas free of obstacles. Airport operations must include effective bird strike control. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis helpful, please subscribe to ensure you do not miss any future independent aircraft investigations.